thing I forgot to mention was to make sure that you go to the link in the description, and there is a petition on USA Gov. Make sure to sign up and put your signature on it. It needs quite a few signatures, so make sure to spread the word around to get the signatures needed. This petition is to have the EPA investigated for wrongdoings to companies like Volkswagen and trying to push ulterior motives. So I think it would be good. One more petition isn't going to hurt, because there are a few out there for the conversion of on-road cars to race cars, but there is not one that is actually focusing on the EPA like this one is. Most are just focusing on the race car aspect, where this one is focusing on the big picture. Make sure to go and sign the petition and share it with all your friends and tell them how important it is. If they like building race cars and modifying their cars, then it is something that they should sign and do. Thank you. So I wanted to do an update on the EPA thing. A lot of the automotive news sources like Motor Trend and other things like that are kind of putting it off as not that big of a deal. So my first video kind of went into how big of a deal this could be with a ban on road used cars to converting them to race cars. Well, I had a brief read into the 629-page document that's on the EPA's website. Under all the bullshit that's in it, there's some pretty big deals that I thought. So one of the biggest deals that I found in the document was that any vehicle that is rebuilt or has an engine replaced or rebuilt, so the EPA and the NHTSA are on behalf of the Department of DOT. Once this law is passed, so they're pretty much this document, the EPA document is updated, the Department of Transportation. If you rebuild, or if you, which is not a good thing. So if the EPA controls the Department of Transportation, so the EPA cares about emissions and how much emissions a vehicle produces. So the NHTSA cares about how much fuel a vehicle will consume. So it's kind of a battle. The EPA, both are a good thing in reality, because if we didn't have either, we would have unbreathable air. But how much they're enforcing and how corrupt both of them and the Department of Transportation has become, it is more of a socialist country, because they're telling you what you can and can't do. So the biggest thing that I found in this document to me is that you put an engine in a car or have an engine rebuilt and put it in a car, so that vehicle, no matter what year it is, will have to conform to the current EPA standards. So if you have a 1991 Honda Civic or a 2002 BMW, anything, it will have to conform. So do you think they'll pass? What it states in the law is that they will have to pass the emissions regulation of the year the engine was replaced or rebuilt. This subject hasn't been even discussed or talked about by anybody that I've seen online. Everybody's so worried about the modified car ban that was first seen. This was so far down in this 629-page document. It took me probably 2 hours to find it. I didn't read the whole document. Don't get me wrong. I didn't read all 629 pages of it, because that would be ridiculous. There's so much extra wording and stuff that's put in these documents. It's kind of hard to just sit there and spend hours reading this stuff. So I admit I didn't read all of it, but I did find this stuff in it. And I bet you if you keep going through this document, it has a lot of other things that are pretty detrimental to the automotive community, businesses, and a really good business that I think is going to get destroyed by this is salvage yard. Because if you cannot put an engine into a car or rebuild an engine and they're making you conform to the current emission standard, there's no way you're going to pass. And this is on all phase 2 medium and heavy duty vehicles. So what does that entitle? It pretty much entitles anything that's on the road in this document. It goes over campers, it goes over semi-trucks and the generators that are in the semi-trucks to when they're sitting idle and the generator's on, that they have to conform to emission standards. It goes over everything. So it goes over everything. So don't just think that this is going to affect race cars. This document, if it passes, this document, if it passes, is going to affect everything. EPA in this document says they're going to reduce greenhouse gases. Also, the NHTSA states that they're going to reduce fuel consumption. So, in a perfect world, that would be true. You could reduce emissions while reducing fuel consumption. But let's think about Volkswagen. So Volkswagen was just hit hard by the EPA, even though the Volkswagen didn't break any rules. They might have bent the rules a little bit. EPA's document might have had a loophole, but Volkswagen was within the regulations. So I don't think that Volkswagen should be being punished for this. But this is also punishing the whole automotive and heavy-duty industry. So the EPA's document states that when a vehicle is being emissions tested, that it has to pass emissions. It never states that the vehicle has to pass emissions all the time on the highway, which Volkswagen was completely in compliance. So Volkswagen should not have any problems. All their cars shouldn't have to deal with anything today. Their new cars that they're building, of course, they have to conform to the 2016 2017 law that's going to be passed, so the EPA can update it and they can decide how they want the law to be. But as I see it right now, Volkswagen didn't break a single rule. The EPA is just trying to hit them hard. Who knows? They might have not gotten their payoff or something like that. But it's kind of funny because now that Volkswagen is conforming to the emission standard, they're getting crazy, they're getting very, very bad fuel mileage. So they might be conforming to this EPA, but really, what's more important? We're consuming twice as much fuel and creating twice as much emissions because all that fuel being burnt creates emissions, but we're conforming to the emission standard all the time. So it's no big deal. We're not getting better gas mileage, producing less emissions that way. Just where I'm going with it. So that's one thing. And also another thing about the EPA is, so they're so worried about CO2. So we're releasing too much CO2 in the atmosphere. If I put a plastic bag over my head and I breathed for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, I would produce too much CO2 to live in that environment. I'd die. Well, the EPA is saying that a car breathes too much CO2, even though we have fields and fields of cows in Texas that produce millions and millions of farts that are CO2. But they do not care. There is not a rule on how much DEF fluid a vehicle consumes. So they spray the shit out of that DEF fluid to reduce CO2 and NOx. DEF fluid breaks it down, but all DEF fluid is really synthetic cat piss. So you're squirting synthetic cat piss, which is technically ammonia. You're burning ammonia in your engine, and what do you get when you get that? You get a great smell down the highway of combusted ammonia, which if you've ever been behind a diesel truck and they're giving it the good rape, that shit stinks. And I bet you if you stuck that shit in a plastic bag and put it over your head, you'd be dead in probably a few minutes. It'd be a lot worse than being a bag full of CO2. So the EPA plans on reducing emissions by 1 billion metric tons. But somehow they're also going to save 1.8 billion, that's with a B, barrels of oil. Even though all those Volkswagens that they updated the software on and now are getting less fuel mileage than before when they weren't conforming to the standards, they're going to save 1.8 billion barrels of oil somehow. I don't get how that works, because if you're consuming more fuel, so that doesn't mean you're using more barrels of oil? So how are you doing both at the same time? Doesn't make much sense to me. Would have to have somehow, with all this happening, with them cutting out mom and pop automotive repair shops, cutting out salvage yards because you cannot put a used engine in your car anymore, destroying all of aftermarket support on vehicles, all coilovers, engine upgrade parts. You can't do turbos, anything aftermarket on a car. Pretty much SEMA would be dead. And let's see, any automotive repair shop wouldn't be able to do any work that would require emissions. But they're somehow going to create 200 billion in net society benefits. The only thing that I could see coming out of this whole thing that could be an industry would be smog. So in the document it states that the country will conform to California's regulations. Unlike how it is now, where some counties don't have smog regulations and some do, like California, and Colorado doesn't have smog. So I have the quote here. I wasn't going to remember it. I wrote it down and you can see I have some notes because I couldn't remember all this stuff. It's a lot of stuff that I read this morning before I was going to make this video. This is the quote out of the document that I read. So this is for the emissions, or this is the quote out of the document I read for the replacing or rebuilding an engine. So quotes from the EPA document. The EPA is proposing to require that rebuilt engines installed in new incomplete vehicles meet the emission standards applicable in the year of assembly. So that would be 2016 if you did an engine install today or rebuild, including all applicable standards for criteria pollutants. So pretty much you are going to have a big problem with this. That's a big problem for me. If I have to have my 73 240Z conform to emission standards to drive it on the road, there's no way. It'll never conform. It was never meant. The car never had a catalytic converter. It never had any emissions devices on it. Now it has a different engine in it and all kinds of other shit in it that we're not going to go into, but there's no way that it would conform. So even if the rule was to make it conform to the year the engine was from, so for my Z it would be a 1995 GTR, it still wouldn't be able to conform. So, and also they're working with California closely, it said. Working with California closely to create a single set of national standards. So if you love California, I know I don't, with all their emissions bullshit and all their laws, all their gun laws, all their fucking crap that they try to push on the whole rest of the fucking country. So if you want to import a goddamn GTR, you have to conform to California standards because DOT says you do. Well, now they're pushing, the EPA is forcing the rest of the country to conform to California. If you like that, or if you don't, which I fucking do not. And the funny thing is I was talking to, I'm on the Canadian GTR forum, and they were laughing because they're like, well, why are you even talking about this on the Canadian forum? And at the time I was like, well, I think it's a good thing that everybody knows about it because you're on the border and it's a big deal because people import GTRs into the States. And it's kind of a big deal for the US. My Canadian friends, you are not excluded from this. Because the EPA is working with Environment Canada to match Canada's EPA standards to the US standards.
So it sounds like this is going to be pushed up north into Canada, and you guys are going to have to probably conform to California standards as well, as much as you probably don't know and as much as you don't like. So the EPA has a great thing. They want to push towards hybrids. The president and Regina McCarthy want to push you more towards hybrids, more towards electric cars because they produce less emissions. They're pounding on coal plants, but they couldn't get coal plants to conform to the stricter emissions because the coal plants pounded back. So now they're pounding on the automotive industry. And the funny thing about it is electric cars are out of sight, out of mind is the statement, because electric cars produce more pollutants than any car on the road. The coal plants that produce electricity to charge these, even though everybody says that electric car powers up at night, it's a non-peak hour, so the plants have all this excess electricity, blah, blah, blah. The plant's still producing pollutants, and it's a lot more than if you were just driving a gasoline car. The initial investment might be more, and you might not have to buy gas. Throughout the life of the car, you're just paying electricity at your house, and you're producing more pollutants into the sky because there are coal power plants just burning a shitload of coal, and it's just going in the atmosphere. Even though proprietary power plants are pretty efficient and they produce a lot of steam, they still produce pollutants. This document doesn't only go into your fuel system, it also goes into your air conditioning system. So they're going to be, it seems like they're going to want to ban R134A. So your current AC, so the current AC system in your car uses R134A because they banned R12 about, I don't know, it was like 20 years ago or something like that. Something around 20 years ago. So now it seems like they want to get rid of R134A. So plan on there being a ban for that soon and not being able to get any R134A for your car and the next upfit. So who knows what's next. I'm sure the automotive industry has already come up with something because they've known for quite some time that this might be banned.
Another
so hopefully they have something in their pocket, because I know a lot of people.
The Army Corps of Engineers
is making tire companies give up toxic chemicals in so they can see what the resistance values of tires are, so they know which ones are more fuel efficient. So I don't know where that's going. It didn't stay in the document, or I didn't see it because it was a long document, but it may be something to do with tires and what tires are going to let people buy. Who knows? This shit's getting crazy. So this morning I was also watching a presentation by Regina McCarthy. I'm not sure when it was. I think it was sometime last week. But it's going over a lot of, it seems like, her corruption. And one of the key points that I saw in that was that she cares more about air pollutants than she does groundwater. There is a case in the Great Lakes, another case. So we don't just have lead or Colorado, them turning the water orange somehow, which didn't get, neither of those got anything done with them. There's another water case with them dumping barges of sediment, and her response to it was that she'd look into it. Not even one fuck given or care. She doesn't give a shit. She's just trying to push some agenda, and we all know whose agenda it is. I'm not going to say, because it's just such a fucking mess. Like, this whole deal with the fucking government trying to, and I hate being like the fucking I hate being a conspiracy theorist or something and sounding like one, but the government is just trying to take guns, trying to make you decide and tell you what you can do with your vehicles. You can't do this, you can't do that. Telling you how you can raise your fucking kid. They're telling you all this stuff you can't do while the country's getting worse and worse and going downhill. It's not even a Democratic or Republican thing. All right, so I'm going to finish this up on my phone. My camera ran out of storage on it. So it's not even, so where did I leave off? It's not even a Democrat or Republican thing. I get all these posts, post stuff online that you're a Republican and this is why the country's messed up and all this bullshit that fucking people post. And it's like, are you fucking stupid? It's not a Democrat. It's not a Democratic or Republican thing. These people are so fucking stupid that they're more worried about a side to be on, Obama, Bush, Trump, Hillary, all this fucking bullshit. They're less worried about how the country is fucking turning out, which is the biggest fucking bullshit ever. So it doesn't matter if Trump, Hillary, fucking a dog, a piece of shit gets in the White House, Bush, Obama, fucking anybody could be in the White House. And things are going to be exactly the same because it's not Republican or Democrat representing the country. It's government and citizens. So if you want the country to be back to the way it was and everything to be profitable, businesses to be profitable, us to be out of debt, the citizens, not the government, need to prosper. This is the end of the video. I hope I don't have to make another one. I'm going to read more in the document. Sorry I had to finish this up on my phone. If you like this, subscribe, like, and comment. I'm pretty good at getting back to comments. If you don't like this, comment anyway. We could have a discussion about it. I'm really not into getting a big internet argument for no reason, but maybe we could see eye to eye because this is not a side thing. This is a country. You're in America. You're an American in America. Fucking act like it.